It's on.
Cool. So faced with the constraints of the African countries and no electricity, the first design choice we made in creating the peanut crusher was to have it be hand-operated and hand-cranked. The first step in the process was to identify how much of an improvement was necessary to see what could be left as a manual process and what needed to be automated. In that determination, we made rough estimates of the number of peanuts that could be done by hand. This was done by measuring members of the team performing the operation. We found that less than 3 pounds of peanuts could be processed by hand, which means that we need an improvement of about 30 to 40 times. To do so, most of the process would need to be automated. So the first step that we did in creating the process was design the actual part that would shred the peanut and separate the nuts from the shells. This is done through a Ferris wheel type system. The Ferris wheel system on it has scoops which are then transported to the device that shreds them. The device is operated like this. It has a blade at the top and it has a wedge at the bottom. The wedge forces the peanut that the scoop has grabbed up against the top of the scoop, and the blade cuts through. The most important functional part of the scoop design is that the scoop is open on both the bottom and the top, but not in such proportions such that a peanut can fall out. The bottom is open such that a wedge can push the peanut up. The wedge, obviously smaller than what is reasonable for a peanut, accounting for the variation in size. And then the top is open just a little bit to allow the blade to serrate through. The scoop is closed in the back, or the scoop is closed at the center point of the back, I guess the centroid of the peanut, which will force the peanut forward against the blade as the hand crank is being operated. And in order to account for both of these openings, there's an external support structure affixed to the wheel itself. Each one of these scoops goes into a bucket full of peanuts. They will grab a peanut in the orientation that is necessary because that's the only way a peanut can fit into it. Obviously, because of this, there will be misses, so more peanuts need to be loaded into the system than the desired output is. After spinning the Ferris wheel, slicing them, it is just dropped into another bucket. This is the shakeout bucket. This bucket contains both the nuts and the shells already sliced. We assume that being able to shake this bucket and have holes the size of average peanuts or a little bit bigger than average peanuts would leave the shells in the bucket. So to take a look at the actual process versus the current one. In the current process, a person grabs a peanut, breaks the shell, separates the shell from the nut, and places the nut separately. Our process does the same thing, but it involves 2 extra steps. The first step is the loading of the nuts, which means just throwing them into a wedge-shaped bucket such that gravity forces them down and the scoops in the Ferris wheel can grab them. The second is the grabbing, which is the double open scoop that I just described, shown here and here. The scoop's grabber will grab nuts in the right orientation, and then there's a cutting tool at the top of the Ferris wheel that will cut them apart. The separation is done by a manual shakeout process in which an operator will have to shake the bucket. The design is obviously not complete because of time constraints. The things that still need to be considered are the dimensions of the scoop, the wedge, and the cutter in relation to sizes of peanuts and variation in sizes of peanuts. And as for the efficiency of the process, the shakeout process is manual, and it is the bottleneck in the process. Everything else is automated. Just as fast as you can crank it, it'll grab peanuts. So once the system is operational, we have a prototype, we'll have to test how efficient the shakeout process is to see if either more operators are needed to keep up with the demands of 110 pounds per hour, or if the shakeout bucket itself needs a redesign. So assuming that the hand crank can be turned such that 110 pounds of nuts can be processed, this should be sufficient. Additionally, the project does not require one device. Sorry. I think that more than one of these devices could sufficiently meet the desired throughput, and the devices are simple to create as they are just hand crank Ferris wheels with a specialized tool at the top.
Great. Do you have anything to add?